The bell above the shop door chimed cheerfully, a sound that mocked Dorothea Hartley's desperation. She stepped inside the charity shop on Cheapside, her worn boots leaving faint wet marks on the wooden floor. The autumn rain had soaked through her threadbare cloak, and she could feel the cold settling into her bones. "Please," Thea said to the woman behind the counter, keeping her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I'm looking for work, any kind of work. I can sew, mend, clean." Mrs. Daventry looked up from her ledger, her round face initially pleasant. Then recognition flickered across her features like a struck match. Her expression hardened. "You," she hissed, loud enough that the three customers browsing the shelves turned to stare. "I know who you are. Margaret Pembroke told me all about you." Thea's stomach dropped. Her heart began to pound against her ribs. "Mrs. Daventry, please listen." "Get out." The older woman stood, pointing a trembling finger toward the door. "I'll not have a thief in my establishment. The nerve of you, coming here as if you're respectable." "I didn't steal anything," Thea whispered, but her voice was lost beneath the rising murmurs of the other customers. "She's the one," a woman in a green bonnet said to her companion. "The governess who stole Lady Pembroke's sapphires. Disgraceful. Should be transported." The words pelted Thea like stones. She backed toward the door, her vision blurring. Not from tears, she'd run out of those weeks ago, but from sheer exhaustion and hunger. "Out!" Mrs. Daventry shrieked, "before I summon a constable." Thea fled into the rain. The streets of London had never felt so hostile. She walked without direction, her feet carrying her away from the city that had once been home. 3 weeks. It had been 3 weeks since Lady Pembroke had summoned her into the drawing room, since those cold eyes had accused her of theft, since the constable had searched her tiny attic room and found nothing, because there was nothing to find. But evidence didn't matter when a lady of standing pointed her finger at a nobody. Thea's employment had ended that day. Her references, years of spotless service, had become worthless paper. Former colleagues crossed the street when they saw her. Landlords refused her rooms. Even the workhouse had turned her away after someone whispered her name. She walked for hours, then days. The city gave way to countryside, gray skies bleeding into gray roads. Her last shilling had bought a stale roll 2 days ago. The fever that had been threatening at the edges of her consciousness now pushed forward with insistence. Somewhere in Somerset, her aunt's letter had said, a village called Blackmere. It was the only name Thea had left, though the letter was 5 years old, and the aunt might well be dead. The rain intensified. Thea's legs trembled with each step. The world tilted sideways. She saw iron gates ahead, massive and imposing. Beyond them, a manor house loomed through the mist. Blackmere Hall, according to the crest on the gate. Thea's knees buckled. The ground rushed up to meet her. Then, nothing. The sound of hoofbeats cut through the storm. Rowan Ashford, Earl of Blackmere, urged his stallion faster, eager to escape the rain and the empty village he'd just left. He hated going to the village, hated the way people stared, the way conversations stopped when he passed. 5 years of isolation had made him efficient at avoiding humanity. The gates of his estate appeared through the downpour, and he exhaled with relief. Then he saw her, a dark shape crumpled at the foot of the gate, rain-soaked and unmoving. Rowan's first instinct was to ride past, let the servants handle it, but something made him stop. Perhaps it was the way her hand was outstretched, as if she'd been reaching for shelter. Perhaps it was the memory of his own desperation, once upon a time. He dismounted. His gloved hands hesitated before he knelt beside her. She was young, unconscious, burning with fever even in the rain. Rowan glanced toward the house. He should call for help. He should maintain his distance. He gathered her into his arms. She weighed nothing. Her breathing was shallow, and her dark hair clung to a face that was too pale, too thin. He carried her through the gates, past the courtyard, up the steps of Blackmere Hall, his boots echoing in the empty foyer. "Mrs. Cullens!" His voice cracked from disuse. The housekeeper appeared instantly, her expression shifting from surprise to alarm. "My lord, what?" She collapsed at the gate. Rowan's arms tightened around the stranger. His hands were shaking beneath his gloves, the first time he'd held another person in 5 years. "Prepare the green room. Summon Dr. Whitmore." "Yes, my lord." Mrs. Cullens hurried ahead, and Rowan followed, this unconscious woman in his arms feeling heavier with each step. Not from her weight, from what it meant that he couldn't make himself put her down. Thea woke to warmth. Clean sheets, the scent of lavender and beeswax. For a moment, she thought she'd died. Then her body reminded her she was very much alive. Every muscle ached, her throat burned, and her head throbbed with a dull insistence. "Awake at last, are we?" Thea turned her head, slowly, because the room spun, toward the voice. A woman in her 50s stood beside the bed, kind eyes examining her with practiced concern. "Where?" Thea's voice came out as a rasp. "Blackmere Hall." The woman poured water from a pitcher into a glass. "You've been unconscious for 3 days, miss. Gave us quite a fright. I'm Mrs. Cullens, the housekeeper. What's your name?" "Dorothea Hartley." The water was heaven. "I don't understand. How did I—" "The master found you at the gates during the storm. Carried you in himself." Mrs. Cullens's expression softened with something that might have been wonder. "First time he's touched another soul in years, I'd wager." Thea's brow furrowed. "The master?" "The Earl of Blackmere, Lord Ashford." Mrs. Cullens busied herself fluffing pillows unnecessarily. "He's a private man, prefers solitude, but he insisted we care for you properly." Shame flooded through Thea. Charity. She'd become an object of charity. "I can pay," she lied, because pride was all she had left. "Once I'm well, I can work." "Rest first." Mrs. Cullens's tone was gentle but firm. "We'll sort the details later." But Thea couldn't rest, not when she was in debt to strangers, not when she had nothing to offer but herself. "Please," she whispered, "let me speak to Lord Ashford. I'll work for my keep. I was a governess. I can teach, clean, manage accounts. Miss Hartley, I won't be a burden." Thea forced herself to sit up despite the way the room tilted. "I've been a burden to no one my entire life, and I won't start now." Mrs. Cullens studied her for a long moment. Then she sighed. "I'll ask the master. But don't expect him to say yes. He doesn't like company." That evening, as Thea managed to stand on unsteady legs, she caught her first glimpse of the Earl of Blackmere through the window of her room. He stood in the garden below, a tall figure in black, his back to the house. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept his hands hidden in his coat pockets. Why, she whispered to the glass, why had he saved her? Why had a reclusive earl carried a stranger into his home? She didn't have answers, but she would find them. The next morning, Mrs. Cullens delivered the news with barely concealed surprise. "The master says you may work as a temporary governess. The house needs organizing. We've let things go since the previous staff left. He'll pay you a fair wage, and you'll have room and board." Thea's throat tightened. "Thank you." "Don't thank me, miss. Thank Lord Ashford, though I doubt you'll see much of him. He keeps to himself." But Thea saw him everywhere. In the books left on the library table for her. In the way the servants spoke of him, with loyalty, never pity. In the footsteps that paused outside her door at night before moving on. The Earl of Blackmere had saved her life. She wondered what had happened to his. Blackmere Hall smelled of old wood and loneliness. Thea spent her first days cataloging the neglect. Dust on bookshelves, tarnished silver, windows that hadn't been opened in months. The house wasn't dirty, precisely, just sad. She threw herself into work, polishing, organizing, breathing life back into forgotten corners. It gave her purpose, this house, and God knew she needed purpose more than she needed air. Mrs. Cullens watched her efforts with approval. "You're good at this, Miss Hartley." "I like order," Thea replied, running her cloth over a bronze statue. Things make sense when they're in their proper places. Unlike people, unlike her life. She saw Lord Ashford only in glimpses during those first weeks. A shadow moving through the corridors at dawn, a figure on horseback disappearing into the woods, a silhouette in the library late at night. He never spoke to her, never acknowledged her presence beyond the wages that appeared promptly each week on the hall table. But she noticed things. He always wore gloves, even indoors, even in the warmth of the library fire. He avoided the east wing entirely, where windows would let in afternoon light. He took his meals alone, though Mrs. Cullen set a place for him in the dining room like a ritual of hope. "What happened to him?" Thea asked one evening while helping Mrs. Cullens prepare dinner. The housekeeper's hands stilled over the vegetables. "That's not my story to tell, miss." "But something did happen." "Something happens to everyone, doesn't it?" Mrs. Cullens met her eyes. "Even you, I'd wager." Thea looked away. Touché. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday night when Thea couldn't sleep. She'd been dreaming of Lady Pembroke's drawing room, of accusations and pointing fingers, and woke with her heart racing. She padded downstairs in her nightdress and robe, seeking the comfort of books. The library door was ajar, candlelight spilling into the hallway. She should have turned back, should have respected his privacy, but loneliness is a powerful thing. "I apologize," Thea said softly from the doorway. "I didn't mean to intrude." Lord Ashford sat in a leather chair by the fire, a book open in his lap. He looked up, and for the first time, she saw his face clearly. Strong features, dark hair that wanted to be combed back but kept falling forward, eyes that held too much and revealed too little. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30, and handsome, though he seemed determined to hide it. "You're not intruding," he said, his voice rough. "The library belongs to the house, not to me. Still, it's late." "So it is." He gestured to the surrounding shelves. "Insomnia?" "Nightmares," Thea admitted before she could stop herself. Something flickered in his expression. Understanding, perhaps? "There's tea on the table, still warm. Help yourself." She shouldn't. This was crossing a line, but God, she was tired of lines. Thea poured herself a cup and settled into the chair opposite his. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but weighted with things unsaid. "What do you dream about?" he asked suddenly. "Injustice," Thea said. "People believing lies because the liar has a title and I don't." "Ah." He set his book aside. "You were accused of something." "Theft." The word tasted bitter. "My employer claimed I stole her sapphires. I didn't. But who believes a governess over a lady? Did they find the jewels?" "No, because I didn't take them." Thea gripped her teacup. "The constable searched my room, found nothing. But Lady Pembroke's word was enough to destroy my reputation. No one would hire me. No one would even look at me." Lord Ashford studied her in the firelight. "I believe you." 2 words. That's all it took for Thea's throat to close with emotion. "Why?" she whispered. "Because I know what it's like to be judged for something beyond your control." He stood, moving to the window. "Society is remarkably efficient at discarding people who don't meet its standards." "What happened to you?" The question escaped before Thea could cage it. His shoulders tensed. For a moment, she thought he'd walk out, end this fragile connection. Instead, he laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "I was engaged once. Beautiful woman, impeccable lineage. She loved me, I thought." He stared out at the dark grounds. "Then there was an accident. Fire in the stables. I pulled out 3 horses and 2 stable boys. Became a hero for about 5 minutes." Thea waited. Her heart ached for what was coming. "The burns healed, mostly, but they left marks." His gloved hands flexed at his sides. "My fiancé came to visit me while I was recovering. The physician was changing my bandages. She took one look and—" He stopped. "She left," Thea finished quietly. "Not immediately. That would have been kinder. His voice hardened. She stood there and said, "I can't marry a monster, Rowan. I'm sorry." Then she left. The wedding was supposed to be in 3 weeks. Thea stood, crossing to him without thinking. She was a fool. She was practical. "I'm disfigured, Miss Hartley, not fit for society. You're fit for anything you choose to be fit for." Anger surged through her, hot and righteous. And if society can't see that, then society is the monster, not you. He turned to face her, surprise evident in his features. "You don't know what I look like beneath these." He lifted his gloved hands. "I know you carried a dying stranger through a rainstorm. I know you gave her shelter and wages and dignity." Thea held his gaze. "I know more about your character from that single act than I could learn from seeing your hands." The silence that followed was different, charged. "Why were you on the road alone?" he asked, his voice softer. "I was looking for my aunt. She lived near Blackmere, or used to. Her name was Dorothy Hartley." Thea smiled sadly. "I was named for her, actually. She was the family scandal, ran off with a merchant. My mother never spoke to her again, but she sent me a letter once, years ago. Said if I ever needed sanctuary, she'd help." "Was?" "I asked in the village. She died 2 years ago." "So you have no one?" "No one," Thea confirmed. "But then, neither do you, it seems." Lord Ashford, Rowan, his name was Rowan, almost smiled. "We're quite a pair, aren't we? 2 discards from society, sharing tea in the middle of the night." "At least we're discards with excellent taste in literature," Thea said, picking up his abandoned book. "Wordsworth? Really?" "What's wrong with Wordsworth?" "Nothing if you enjoy excessive contemplation of daffodils." He did smile then, a real one that transformed his face. "You prefer Byron, I suppose." "I prefer Austen, actually. At least her heroines have some agency." "Agency?" He said the word like he was testing it. "Is that what you want?" "Isn't that what we all want?" Thea met his eyes. "The ability to shape our own lives instead of being shaped by others' opinions?" "Yes," he said simply. "God, yes." They talked until the fire died to embers, about books and philosophy and the small cruelties of the world. Rowan was witty when he forgot to be bitter, with a dry humor that caught Thea off guard and made her laugh, truly laugh, for the first time in months. When she finally returned to her room, dawn was breaking through the windows. She should have been exhausted. Instead, she felt awake. After that night, the walls between them began to crumble. Rowan started taking meals in the dining room when Thea was there. They discussed books over breakfast, debated philosophy over dinner. He showed her the grounds, the garden maze, the orchard, the lake where swans nested. "I haven't been to the village in 3 years," he admitted during one of their walks. "Mrs. Cullens handles everything. I told myself it was easier, less painful." Was it? No. He watched the swans glide across the water. It was just different pain, loneliness instead of rejection. "I understand that," Thea said. "After the accusations, I thought I wanted to disappear, to become invisible. But invisibility is its own kind of death. Then we're both ghosts." He glanced at her. "Though you seem more alive than any specter I've encountered." "You haven't encountered many specters, have you?" "Only the ones in my mirror." The ease between them grew. Thea found herself seeking his company, and he, miraculously, seemed to seek hers. They fell into routines, morning tea in the library, afternoon walks, evening conversations that stretched into night. Mrs. Cullens watched them with barely concealed delight. "Haven't seen him this animated in years," she told Thea while kneading bread dough. "You're good for him, miss." "I'm just here," Thea replied, uncomfortable with the praise. "You're seeing him. That's more than most have done." But it was more than that, and Thea knew it. She was falling for Rowan Ashford, falling for his intelligence and his sadness, and the way he looked at her like she was something precious instead of something discarded. She tried to fight it, reminded herself that she was an employee, that he was an earl, that women like her didn't get happy endings with men like him. The heart, unfortunately, doesn't listen to logic. One evening in the kitchen, because Rowan had taken to joining her there when Mrs. Cullens had her day off, Thea attempted to make scones. "They're supposed to be light and fluffy," she muttered, staring at the hockey pucks she'd produced. "They look dense," Rowan offered diplomatically. "They look like weapons." Thea poked one experimentally. It didn't give. "I could kill someone with these." Self-defense scones, a novel concept. She threw a dish towel at him. He caught it, laughing, actually laughing, a sound that made something warm bloom in her chest. "Here," he moved beside her at the counter. "You overmixed the dough. Touch it gently, like—" He stopped abruptly, his gloved hands hovering over the flour. "Like what?" Thea asked quietly. "Like something fragile." Their eyes met. The air between them changed, thickened. "Rowan," she whispered. He stepped back. I'll let you finish." But he didn't leave. Neither did she. They stood there in the kitchen, surrounded by failed scones and possibility, both too afraid to reach for what they wanted. The turning point came during a storm. Thea had developed a fondness for the estate's glass conservatory. She went there when she needed to think, surrounded by green things and the sound of rain on glass. It reminded her of growth, of things that thrived despite harsh conditions. She was there that night, watching lightning fracture the sky, when Rowan appeared in the doorway. "I've been looking for you," he said. "Found me?" She didn't turn from the window. "Something wrong?" "No. Yes." He moved to stand beside her. "I don't know." Thea glanced at him. "That's remarkably unclear for a man who usually speaks in complete sentences. I can't think in complete sentences around you anymore." Her heart stuttered. "Rowan, you want to know why I hide these?" He held up his gloved hands. "Why I avoid mirrors and society and anything that reminds me of who I used to be. You don't have to." "I do." His voice was rough. "Because you see me, Thea. You actually see me. And I need you to know what you're seeing." Before she could respond, he pulled off his gloves. The scars were extensive. Burns that had healed into mottled skin, shiny and tight across his knuckles and up his wrists. His left hand was worse than his right, the fingers slightly curled, the skin puckered and red even years after the fire. "There," he said bitterly, "the monster beneath the gentleman." Thea's vision blurred, not from disgust, from rage. "She called you a monster?" Her voice shook. "That woman looked at these hands that saved lives, and called them monstrous? They're not. They're beautiful." Thea reached out, stopping just before touching him. "May I?" He nodded, not trusting his voice. She took his hands in hers. They were warm, solid, real. "These hands carried me through the rain when I was dying," she said. "These hands gave me sanctuary, purpose, hope." She traced the scars gently, feeling him tremble. "These are the most beautiful hands I've ever seen." "Thea, I'm falling in love with you." The confession tumbled out before she could stop it. "I know I shouldn't. I know I'm just a governess and you're an earl, and this is impossible. But I can't. I don't." He kissed her. It was desperate and tender and tasted like rain. His scarred hands cupped her face, and she wound her arms around his neck, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I'm in love with you," he whispered. "I think I have been since you called Wordsworth excessive." Thea laughed through tears. "That's when you knew?" "That's when I knew I was in trouble." They held each other as the storm raged outside, two broken people finding wholeness in each other's arms. That morning brought reality. 3 days later, a rider arrived from London. Jonas Webb, Rowan's solicitor and childhood friend, brought news that would change everything. "The jewels were found," Jonas announced over tea in the library. "In the possession of Lady Pembroke's companion, a Miss Olivia Marsh. She's confessed to the theft." Thea's cup rattled in her saucer. What? Apparently, Miss Marsh has been stealing from Lady Pembroke for months. Small things at first, then the sapphires. When suspicion began to fall on her, Lady Pembroke diverted attention to you. Jonas looked grim. I suspect Lady Pembroke knew the truth all along. That woman destroyed my life to protect her companion? Thea's voice rose. She let me starve, be shunned, nearly die? She'll face consequences, Jonas assured her. But there's more. To clear your name properly, we need a public acknowledgement. Lady Pembroke must admit her error before witnesses of standing. Rowan had been silent throughout the conversation. Now he stood, moving to the window. That means London, he said flatly. Yes. Jonas watched his friend carefully. It means facing society. No. Thea stood as well. I don't need a public declaration. I have work here, a place. You deserve your name back, Rowan interrupted, turning to face her. You deserve to walk down a London street without shame. You deserve justice. And what about what you deserve? Thea challenged. You'd have to return to a society that calls you a monster. I'd have to be brave. His scarred hands clenched at his sides. I'd have to stop hiding. Stop letting her win. Her? My former fiancé. Society. Everyone who made me believe I was less than human. He crossed to Thea, taking her hands. You faced your demons when you walked into that charity shop. You kept fighting, even when the world told you to disappear. Let me fight for you now. Rowan, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. He smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Besides, someone has to tell Lady Pembroke what I think of women who destroy innocent lives. Jonas coughed. I take it that's a yes? That's a yes, Rowan confirmed. Arrange a dinner, something public. Let's give society something to gossip about. The carriage ride to London took 2 days. Thea spent most of it alternating between nervousness and anger. Nervous for Rowan, angry at the system that demanded they perform their trauma for social consumption. We don't have to do this, she said for the 10th time as they crossed into the city proper. Yes, we do. Rowan squeezed her hand. He'd stopped wearing gloves around her, though he'd donned them again for the journey. Not just for you, for me too. I've been hiding for 5 years. It's time to stop. Jonas had arranged for them to stay with Lord and Lady Ashworth, distant cousins who owed Rowan a favor. The dinner party would be held at their Mayfair townhouse, with carefully selected guests including Lady Pembroke and several members of the Tun's most influential families. She doesn't know I'm behind this, Jonas explained over dinner the night before the event. I sent the invitation through Lady Ashworth. As far as Lady Pembroke knows, this is a normal social engagement. And the evidence? Rowan asked. Miss Marsh's confession, written and signed, the recovered jewels, and a statement from Lady Pembroke's former maid who witnessed the actual theft. Jonas permitted himself a smile. We're quite thoroughly prepared. Thea barely slept that night. She kept thinking about the charity shop, about Mrs. Daventry's pointing finger, about the weight of accusation. Tomorrow, she'd face that weight again. But this time, she wouldn't face it alone. Rowan knocked on her door at dawn, finding her already dressed in the simple evening gown Lady Ashworth had lent her. You look terrified, he said gently. I am terrified. Good, so am I. He entered the room, closing the door behind him. But I want you to remember something. Whatever happens tonight, whatever they say or think, you are not that woman in the charity shop anymore. You're not alone. You're not defenseless. Who am I then? You're the woman who called my hands beautiful. He drew her close. You're the woman who challenged me to stop hiding. You're brave and brilliant and entirely too good for the people we're about to face. Rowan, and after tonight, you're going to be my wife. Thea pulled back to stare at him. What? If you'll have me. He was smiling now, nervous and hopeful. I'm not doing this properly, I know, I don't have a ring prepared, and we're in a borrowed bedroom, and yes, I should probably ask your father, except you don't have. He stopped. Yes? Yes, you ridiculous man. Thea laughed through tears. Yes, I'll marry you. He kissed her then, deep and thorough, pouring 5 years of loneliness and a lifetime of hope into the connection. When they finally pulled apart, Thea touched his face. You proposed to me before clearing my name. I proposed to you knowing your name doesn't need clearing, not for me. He covered her hand with his. But I'll clear it anyway, because the world needs to know what I know, that you're extraordinary. The dinner party was torture. Thea sat beside Lady Ashworth, enduring curious glances and whispered conversations. She recognized several faces from her time in London, women who'd once asked her advice about their children, men who'd nodded politely in passing. Now they looked at her like she was a curiosity, a scandal made flesh. Lady Pembroke arrived fashionably late, dripping with jewels and condescension. She didn't even glance in Thea's direction, too busy holding court with the other ladies. Insufferable woman, Lady Ashworth muttered. I never liked her. Then Rowan entered the dining room. The change in atmosphere was immediate. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Rowan had dressed in formal black, his cravat perfectly tied, his posture that of a man who owned the room. But he wasn't wearing gloves. The scars on his hands were visible to everyone. He made no attempt to hide them. Thea's heart swelled with pride. Lord Blackmere, Lady Ashworth said warmly, rising to greet him. How wonderful to see you back in society. Lady Ashworth, Rowan bowed politely. Then his eyes found Thea's across the room. Miss Hartley. He crossed directly to her, ignoring the gasps this produced. He took her hand, in front of everyone, and raised it to his lips. You're radiant, he murmured. You're insane, she whispered back. That too. Dinner was announced. Jonas had arranged the seating carefully. Rowan at the head of the table as guest of honor, Thea to his right, Lady Pembroke directly across from them. Lady Pembroke's face when she finally recognized Thea was a picture. You, she hissed. Yes, Thea replied calmly. Me. How dare you show your face in decent company, after what you... After what I did? Rowan's voice cut across the table like a blade. Do enlighten us, Lady Pembroke. What exactly did Miss Hartley do? Lady Pembroke's eyes narrowed. She stole my sapphires. Everyone knows. Everyone knows a lie. Jonas stood, producing a sheaf of papers. These documents tell a different story. Miss Olivia Marsh's confession, testimony from your former maid. And these, he placed a velvet box on the table, opening it to reveal sapphires that glittered in the candlelight, the recovered jewels, found in Miss Marsh's possession. The room erupted in whispers. That's impossible, Lady Pembroke sputtered. Olivia would never... She confessed 3 weeks ago. Jonas's voice was relentless. She's been stealing from you for months, Lady Pembroke, and when suspicion began to fall on her, you chose to protect her by destroying Miss Hartley's reputation. I did no such thing! Didn't you? Rowan leaned forward. You accused an innocent woman without evidence. You used your social standing to ensure she'd never work again. You let her be driven from London with nothing. No money, no references, no hope. She was a servant, Lady Pembroke said desperately. It doesn't matter. It matters. Rowan's voice was quiet now, dangerous. It matters that you destroyed a life to save your own pride. It matters that you're the kind of person who values reputation over truth. He stood, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Miss Dorothea Hartley is innocent, and she will be my countess. The silence was absolute. Then Lady Ashworth began to applaud. Others joined, hesitantly at first, then with more enthusiasm. Social calculation was swift. Lady Pembroke had lost this battle, and aligning with the Earl of Blackmere was strategically sound. Lady Pembroke sat frozen, her face white with rage and humiliation. "You'll regret this," she hissed at Rowan. "The only regret I have," Rowan replied, "is that it took me 5 years to stop caring what people like you think." He turned to Thea, extending his scarred hand. "Shall we?" Thea took his hand and stood. Together, they walked out of the dining room, leaving the whispers and stares behind. In the hallway, she stopped him. "That was terrifying? Incredible." She cupped his face. "You magnificent, brave, ridiculous man." "I learned from the best." He kissed her forehead. "A woman who kept fighting even when the world told her to disappear." "Rowan," Thea's voice broke, "you called me your countess." "You object to the title?" "I object to you asking in front of 50 people before asking me properly." He laughed and dropped to one knee right there in the hallway. "Dorothea Hartley, you were rejected by everyone who should have valued you. Will you let me spend the rest of my life being your everything?" "You already are," she whispered, pulling him up to kiss him. "You already are." They married 6 weeks later at Blackmere Hall, with only Mrs. Cullens and Jonas as witnesses. Thea wore a simple dress, and Rowan wore no gloves. Mrs. Cullens cried through the entire ceremony. The Tun talked for months about the Earl of Blackmere's return to society and his scandalous bride. Some were sympathetic, others were horrified. None of it mattered. On their wedding night, Rowan and Thea danced in the library where they'd first truly spoken. No music played, they didn't need it. "Do you regret it?" he asked as they swayed together. "Coming back to London, facing all of that?" Not for a moment. Thea rested her head against his chest. "Do you?" "I regret nothing that led me to you." His scarred hands held her close. "You changed everything, Thea. You made me believe I could be more than my scars." "You were always more." She looked up at him. "You just needed someone to see it. And you needed someone to see you." "I still can't believe this is real sometimes," she admitted, "that I went from being rejected by everyone to being chosen by you." "You weren't chosen," Rowan corrected gently. "You were recognized. There's a difference." Outside, rain began to fall, the same kind of storm that had brought them together. But inside Blackmere Hall, there was only warmth and laughter and love. Thea had been rejected by the world. But Rowan Ashford had made her his world. And that, she thought as he kissed her in the firelight, was more than enough. It was everything.